Thanks for joining me for this tour of my virtual exhibition of the winter collection of If We Were a Love Song. I find it interesting how I seem to find myself for brief moments in time and then kind of lose parts of me along the way that I want to keep. The If We Were a Love Song collection is an artistic conversation where I explore this phenomenon. But wait, what does this have to do with love songs? Because every aspect of life's journey is experienced through the heart. Enduring both the highs and the lows, there's a song out there that captures that feeling. With these artworks, I'm transposing some of the ideas of those feelings into images. This look into the first exhibition for the If We Were a Love Song collection is called More a Thought Than a Whisper. The name is derived from a classical piece I wrote in my late teens. It's an instrumental piece where I wasn't yet aware of how I wanted to use my voice. The winter collection of If We Were a Love Song finds me at an intersection where I'm again discovering and reflecting on the creative intersection of myself and the expression of that self through art. In short, an exploration of thoughts not yet sure that I'm ready to give voice to. More Thought Than a Whisper is created and curated through the lens of Lindsay Falco, a fictional character in my wilderness saga stories. If you're new here, along with being a visual artist, I'm also an author. In my fiction stories, Lindsay is a painter, and my process is to take the concept of what I'm trying to express about myself and the world, and then filtering how I express it through her character. Since Lindsay is a literary self-portrait of who I was in my 20s, this process goes one level deeper because there are going to be intersections between how my hopes, dreams, and fears during that part of my life shows up in Lindsay's stories and how those fictional experiences translates into Lindsay's character creating the art. I know this can be a little tricky to wrap your head around. It is for me, and I'm the one doing it. So let's get into the actual guided exhibition tour. The easiest way to describe this is as a conversation where all the levels I just mentioned have this call and response between them as I create and relate to each artwork. We begin with Early Bright. I've always been attracted to the big city, especially in my 20s. The idea of living in a big, fast-paced city was attractive to me. So much so that over a one-weekend trip to New York City, I literally came back to California feeling like everyone spoke too slow, drove too slow, and it was all I could do to not lean on my horn every time someone was in my way while driving. For those that are familiar with this particular doll, she represents in Lindsay's artwork in the Wilderness Saga stories Sorry, I lost myself there. Okay, for those that are familiar with this particular doll and how she's represented in Lindsay's artwork in the Wilderness Saga stories, you'll remember that this doll always reflects the aspirational life for her after she became a woman and what she hoped to one day be. In this case, filtered through her eyes is my desire of living in a big city where she never loses the wonder that comes from being connected to such a vibrant environment. Okay. That is what I'm looking for. I encourage you to come back to this gallery on your own so that you can experience it with the background music playing in the space. Although the melodies and feel of the song are completely different than its inspiration, when I wrote the song for The Good and the Bye, I was reflecting on the Rain song from Led Zeppelin, where Jimmy Page, annoyed that he wasn't getting his due as a superior guitar player, wrote a song heavy with guitar orchestration in it. The Good and the Bye was my own version of leaning into my next phase as a guitar-based songwriter with an ear for orchestrated detail. As a whole, there are four guitars subtly woven into the sonic tapestry, accompanied by drums, percussion, bass, piano, synthesizer, and horns, all blended together melodically to form a nostalgic look into the past with one eye gazing towards a hopeful future. The song itself is written in the character Andros Koresh, who in the Wilderness Saga stories is the best friend of Lindsay Falco. In the Gospel of Wolves, in spite of their deep connection with one another, they don't get much page time together in the story. If anything, Andros is more in the background of what's going on in Lindsay's life. So I thought it appropriate in this collection, through Lindsay's eyes, for Andros to be present, but not ever actually seen. In the context of the fictional character Lindsay Falco, from the speculative fiction stories for the Wilderness Saga, this doll represents Lindsay's acceptance of her skin tone. Because of the negative connotations on dark skin, even within the African American community, I purposely made Lindsay dark-skinned as resistance to the idea that beauty is only present with lighter skin. It's only mentioned in stories where there is a direct correlation between what's happening in the story and Lindsay's feelings about her skin color, but in the wider context, it's something that is reflected almost exclusively in the artwork I curate for her. In this instance, this doll celebrates her dark skin, her kinky afro puffs, and the wide-eyed hope and happiness that she refuses to let anyone take away from her. The name Ravenwood references her raven black hair and how she dares to move forward in spite of others' perceptions and limiting beliefs of who and what she can become. In this exhibition, you may notice that there are a variety of dualities that surface in the artwork. Every artwork in this exhibition has a companion piece to it. Where Ravenwood speaks to the idea of self-acceptance, The Wealth of Joy takes the idea of glamour and attaches it to the concept that joy comes from that self-acceptance and loving who we are and finding a way to enjoy our journey. With efflorescence, it looks like I got the season wrong. I know winter is supposed to conjure up self-reflection and a turn inwards, and that's precisely why I went with such a vibrant display. Efflorescence represents the ability to look inward and find the beauty in yourself, even when everything good around you appears to be dead or in hibernation. One thing you'll notice in all of the stories that includes Lindsay is that internal battle where she is really trying to keep focus on who she is and move past all of the things in her life that would otherwise bring her down. We've all known someone whose life we wish we had, but regardless of what we perceive that person's life to be, they're suffering and struggling with their own aches, pains, and points of vulnerability. Bella Lure explores that phenomenon. If you've been following my doll art collections over the past few years, you may remember that this doll represents innocence and naivete. Here, through the eyes of the fictional character Lindsay Falco, I'm using the doll to represent the allure of not knowing the problems of the world and returning to a place where everything seemed possible. The reason I didn't lead with this image in the gallery is because I believe we can have both. I believe we can hold on to our childlike hope while leveraging the hard-won wisdom of our experiences to return to a state where anything is possible. Game of Thrones factored into the image of firewood. I've always liked the phrase used in both the book series and the television series, "Kissed by Fire," and how it refers to redheads, and that combined with the determination I see in the gaze of this doll, it makes me think that whatever it is she desires, she would dare to venture into that experience. In the story world of my fiction series, The Wilderness Saga, she's the proxy doll for the character Tabitha Harper. And this is how the character Lindsay Falco perceives her: a woman who will persist regardless of the obstacles ahead of her. And just as this image was the spark that influenced me to name her sister artwork Ravenwood, Tabitha will serve as a role model in certain ways to Lindsay. I know this kind of declaration, taken out of context, will create some controversy over the quote-unquote white savior aspect often found in storytelling, so I'll say it here and now. By the time Tabitha is introduced in book 2 of the series, Lindsay will have well established herself as a capable woman, both in her intellect and her ability to hold her own in a fist fight. Only the ignorant will see her as being written as weak and in need of a savior. My point being, no matter how strong and capable any of us are, we'll always have the opportunities to learn new things from those around us, and to disregard the wisdom and positive influence from a person just because of their race is as stupid as hating them because of that race. The Night Tide is the companion piece to Early Bright, and contains the duality of not only light and dark, but through the eyes of Lindsay Falco, this doll is a proxy for Jackie Strickland, a foe to Lindsay Falco as we open in the book The Gospel of Wolves. The fact that you can't see the entirety of this artwork containing Jackie's proxy without catching a sliver of Lindsay Falco's proxy in the background is not an accident. It's a relationship that requires an actual gallery setting to express the subtle and complicated relationship between two highly capable female characters who have a man quietly turning them against each other in a subplot in The Gospel of Wolves. Notice that I have them turn towards each other. This implies where I see their relationship going in future books. How they get there, however, will be a page-turner, not a simple path. This image features the toy proxy for the fictional character Lucienne Carr, a friend of Lindsay Falco, whose family's military service dates back to Rutherford B. Hayes being president. This image captures how Lucienne wants to be remembered after he dies, as a soldier standing against the dark. As I introduce him in the Gospel of Wolves, you'll find he's far from that goal, but about to set off on a journey that will ask things from him he wasn't aware he had to give. This image is Lindsay Falco's tribute to the journey he takes. The question, why me, isn't always asking why something bad is happening to a person. In the artwork Enigmatic, Lindsay Falco has chosen the doll proxy for Malcolm Price, a man that she's romantically involved in, as we open in The Gospel of Wolves. Because of the path Lindsay and Malcolm are set to travel together on in The Gospel of Wolves, there's a part of her that wants to know what made her so special. The Twilight Zone-ish backdrop is symbolic of the spiritual bond that connects them to each other, and that's about all I can say about that without revealing spoilers from the book. There's an elegance to certain aspects of the earliest 20th century, and all the decorum involved with Western society's idea of what makes a woman a lady. And while Lindsay Falco has rejected just about every measure of that decorum, sometimes with hostility, she privately held high regard for the poise and grace that accompanied it. After her experiences in the Gospel of Wolves, Lindsay began to imagine how life might look if she were to reconsider her views on her relationship with her femininity, and how she might present as a lady. It's a difficult task, taking responsibility for and coming to terms with the decisions that we make in our lives, especially if we look around and realize that we aren't where we thought we should be in our lives. The trick is to own them and course correct with head held high, and that's what's represented in A Promise Kept. If you were here when I first created and curated the chronology of Queen's collection, you'll remember that this particular doll represented the act of venturing in the world with hopes and dreams and finding out firsthand how the world was going to react to them. For most of us, and for the character Lindsay Falco, that's a painful, humbling experience. In this image, though, the promise was to maintain that youthful vigor and willingness to press on, hope held firmly in heart. For all these gallery showings, I'm not only curating the collections by character, I'm also setting the shows up in spaces that will be referenced in the stories I write for the Wilderness Saga. The books that have already been released include The Gospel of Wolves, Regret and Triptych, and A Child of Fox and Phantom. This collection is set in the timeline is happening 5 months after the events of the second book, tentatively titled The Measure of Sharks. The opus of our days, or put less poetically, the work of our days, captures a moment of wonder and gratitude. The light is meant to feel warm and lived in. At her foundation, the character of Lindsay Falco is a literary self-portrait of how I perceived life in my 20s in an effort to lead a life well lived. The idea wasn't so much leading a perfect life as a whole, but to string together as many perfect moments as possible, where I was at peace with myself and my works. The opus of our days is that idea seen, again, through the eyes of Lindsay Falco, and the opus of our days closes his collection by embodying one of those moments. Before we part, though, let's take a step back to find one of the hidden meanings that I've put into the gallery based on the relationship between how the artwork is hung. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. What you see here with both Firewood and the opus of our days is both artworks has the main character looking back on Bella Lure, and it's a reminder to continue to see the world through hopeful eyes, even though our experiences might encourage us to do otherwise. Here's to keeping hope and dreams alive in all of our hearts. Thank you for watching.